The proposition determines a place in logical space. The existence of this logical place is guaranteed by the existence of the constituent parts alone, by the existence of the significant proposition. The propositional sign and the logical coordinates. That is the logical place. The geometrical and the logical place agree in that each is the possibility of an existence. Although a proposition may only determine one place in logical space, the whole logical space must already be given by it. Otherwise, denial, the logical sum, the logical product, and so on would always introduce new elements in coordination. The logical scaffolding round the picture determines the logical space. The proposition reaches through the whole logical space. The applied thought, propositional sign, is the thought. The thought is the significant proposition. The totality of propositions is the language. Man possesses the capacity of constructing languages in which every sense can be expressed, without having an idea how and what each word means, just as one speaks without knowing how the single sounds are produced. Colloquial language is part of the human organism and is not less complicated than it. From it, it is humanly impossible to gather immediately the logic of language. Language disguises the thought, so that from the external form of the clothes one cannot infer the form of the thought they clothe, because the external form of the clothes is constructed with quite another object than to let the form of the body be recognized. The silent adjustments to understand colloquial language are enormously complicated. Most propositions and questions that have been written about philosophical matters are not false, but senseless. We cannot, therefore, answer questions of this kind at all, but only state their senselessness. Most questions and propositions of the philosophers result from the fact that we do not understand the logic of our language. They are of the same kind as the question whether the good is more or less identical to the beautiful. And so it is not to be wondered at that the deepest problems are really no problems. All philosophy is critique of language, but not at all in Mothner's sense. Russell's merit is to have shown that the apparent logical form of the proposition need not be its real form. The proposition is a picture of reality. The proposition is a model of the reality as we think it is. At the first glance, the proposition, say as it stands printed on paper, does not seem to be a picture of the reality of which it treats. But nor does the musical score appear at first sight to be a picture of a musical piece, nor does our phonetic spelling, letters, seem to be a picture of our spoken language. And yet these symbolisms prove to be pictures, even in the ordinary sense of the word, of what they represent. It is obvious that we perceive a proposition of the form ARB as a picture. Here the sign is obviously a likeness of the signified. And if we penetrate to the essence of this pictorial nature, we see that this is not disturbed by apparent irregularities, like the use of "and" in the score. For these irregularities also picture what they are to express, only in another way. The gramophone record, the musical thought, the score, the waves of sound all stand to one another in that pictorial internal relation which holds between language and the world. To all of them, the logical structure is common. To all of them, the logical structure is common. Like the two youths, their two horses and their lilies in the story. They are all in a certain sense one. In the fact that there is a general rule by which the musician is able to read the symphony out of the score, and that there is a rule by which one could reconstruct the symphony from the line on a gramophone record, and from this again, by means of the first rule, construct the score, herein lies the internal similarity between these things, which at first sight seem to be entirely different. And the rule is the law of projection, which projects the symphony into the language of the musical score. It is the rule of translation of this language into the language of the gramophone record. The possibility of all C-miles, of all the imagery of our language, rests on the logic of representation. In order to understand the essence of the proposition, consider hieroglyphic writing, which pictures the facts it describes. And from it came the alphabet without the essence of the representation being lost. This we see from the fact that we understand the sense of the propositional sign without having had it explained to us. The proposition is a picture of reality, for I know the state of affairs presented by it if I understand the proposition, and I understand the proposition without its sense having been explained to me. The proposition shows its sense. The proposition shows how things stand if it is true, and it says that they do so stand. The proposition determines reality to this extent that one only needs to say yes or no to it to make it agree with reality. It must therefore be completely described by the proposition. A proposition is the description of a fact. As the description of an object describes it by its external properties, so propositions describe reality by its internal properties. The proposition constructs a world with the help of a logical scaffolding, and therefore one can actually see in the proposition all the logical features possessed by reality if it is true. One can draw conclusions from a false proposition. To understand the propositions means to know what is the case if it is true. One can therefore understand it without knowing whether it is true or not. One understands it if one understands its constituent parts. The translation of one language into another is not a process of translating each proposition of the one into a proposition of the other, but only the constituent parts of propositions are translated. And the dictionary does not only translate substantives, but also adverbs and conjunctions and so on, and it treats them all alike. The meanings of the simple signs, the words, must be explained to us if we are to understand them. By means of propositions, we explain ourselves.